Hello, Tyler Bryden here. Hope everything's going well. Hope you're having a great day. As always, crazy week. As always, I say that every fucking week. But a lot going on. Now, of course, there's the Elon, there's the Trump controversy. I think there's enough media attention on that. There's enough debate, excitement, giddiness coming from this that I don't need to address it in full detail. Just one thing, I guess I do believe that Elon is true in his sense around this being a mismanagement of money, especially after all of his efforts with Doge. And obviously there was a lot of personal risk that he took on that turned out being fairly detrimental to the brand of Tesla, to his stock price, to his overall perception as a human being. And so there was an immediate blame around wanting these subsidies, and that's the reason why he's mad, and there's some other stuff going on. I am of the belief that he does care about the deficit of the United States, the trajectory they're on, and was very disappointed with how this turned out. Now, there has been an interesting critique around this idea that if Musk believes in AI and XAI truly as much as he says he does, that his feelings around the deficit shouldn't be as significant because that productivity gain, that economic benefit will overwrite the deficit and the spending in this bill. And I don't know how I feel about that sort of argument. I think it makes sense. I think you can want two things at once. And I think you can want fiscal responsibility in the meantime while you see that vision come through. But I thought that was an interesting point. And then, of course, it was the breakup of the century that many of us, I think, saw coming. Here's Trump's message about.
But I'm very disappointed because Elon knew the inner workings of this bill better than almost anybody sitting here. Better than you people. He knew everything about it. He had no problem with it. All of a sudden he had a problem, and he only developed the problem when he found out that we're going to have to cut the EV mandate, because that's billions and billions of dollars, and it really is unfair. We want to have cars of all types. Electric, we want to have electric, but we want to have a gasoline, combustion. We want to have different. We want to have hybrids. We want to have we want to be able to sell everything. And when that was cut, and Congress wanted to cut it, he became a little bit different, and I can understand that. But he knew every aspect of this bill. He knew it better than almost anybody, and he never had a problem until right after he left.
Now, Elon obviously saying this wasn't true. There was a bill that was put out, a version of that, very late, where almost no one got the ability to read the full thing, and that's when this idea of pork and all this extra stuff, all these extra spending programs come into place, leading to the backlash against it. So what do you think? Is Elon truthful in his assessment, or is Trump truthful in his about it being about the EV mandates? It shows me is that there's still a lot of immaturity, there's still a lot of ego, there's still a lot of anger, and there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that we just don't know, and sometimes it just leaks into the light. These are one of these instances, and I'm very interested to see what come next, especially after all the Epstein, all the SpaceX decommissioning. It seems like there was some cooling down and probably a lot of calls and texts coming in to try to make that happen as this was playing out on a world stage. And there's people who would go as far as David Friedberg from the All In podcast who say China just won because of this. Now, a little overdramatic, perhaps. Obviously, this fracture on the world stage is a very interesting and compelling thing for other countries around the world seeking power, either on the side of America or maybe on the opposite side. Now, the thing just that I wanted to touch on quickly that I thought was hilarious is the interplay on the All In podcast. If you don't know the All In podcast, it's Jay Cal Chamath, David Sachs, David Friedberg, all super successful, highly wealthy investors, entrepreneurs who have built a lot of cultural power through their podcast. And now we have Sachs here in the bottom left, who's in the administration with Trump. However, you've got these guys who are also very close friends with Elon Musk. And I think this is this interesting moment between the MAGA party and the Republicans, then the tech bros. I'm using all these media assigned words, who came together for the last election, even though they didn't share necessarily all the same interests. But at least at that time, it was for the greater good and rallying against the Kamala and the progressive left that led to them to unite. And I think it was obvious that they weren't just like friends for no reason. There was mutual interests that were shared here. And this fracturing between Elon and Donald Trump was one of these moments where, because of this podcast, it's highlighted front and center with these people who have been outspoken on both sides of this, on Elon Musk's side and on Donald Trump. Now, they were supposed to record a podcast this week, and there was even JCal tweeting that it was going to happen, but it has not come out, and we don't know if it was recorded and they couldn't make something usable to share, or there was fights that took place on the podcast. We're not really sure, but it's a wildly popular podcast that people follow pretty religiously every week. And so there was a lot of tweets and a lot of memes and a lot of commotion because this episode didn't come up. And this is where I was showing this. You've got David Sachs, the meme there, and they did a little AI on his face, just caught in the middle, wondering who gets David Sachs, and you got him at the White House. He's calling, "Mom, can you pick me up? I'm scared." Split in the middle between these two. And because these guys are so successful, because maybe they've wavered in some ways on their opinions, and they could just say you learn and you change your opinions and perspective over time, there is a lot of focus on them when it comes to moments like this. And they've been very buttery to Trump in the lead up to the election and after the election, with just a small fray after this big, beautiful bill. Which really should have showed up in the last episode, but they donated, they held events, not all of them, but Chamath and Sachs publicly. And so it's definitely led to this bias that's come through on the podcast. And so when this moment happened, I think they did get stuck in the middle, didn't really know what to do, or maybe couldn't come to, I don't think they're trying to come to a consensus, but just couldn't put an episode together. And I think there was also maybe an intention to let this cool down, take a week, and not create an episode right in the middle of all this chaos. So some could look at that as the mature, right thing to do. Other people looking for that drama, looking for that content, and a lot of people saying, hey, this was weak, not for them to not put an episode out, and especially with the connection between them all and the perspective and the power that these guys are now holding through this vehicle, which is the All In podcast. So that was just one thing I thought that was interesting that came out of the whole Elon Musk Trump thing.